Hey everyone, and welcome back. Ready for another deep dive? Today we're taking a close look at myopia control and a technique called orthokeratology.
Orthoc for short.
Exactly. Orthoc. Now, I know a lot of you are probably familiar with the basics, but for those who aren't, it basically involves wearing special contact lenses overnight.
That gently reshape your cornea.
It sounds kind of wild, but apparently it can actually help slow down the progression of nearsightedness.
It really can, and that's what makes it such a promising treatment option, especially considering the growing global prevalence of myopia.
Yeah, myopia or nearsightedness is definitely on the rise. And it's not just about needing glasses or contacts. It's also linked to potential long-term risks.
Oh, absolutely. Things like myopic macular degeneration, cataracts, retinal detachment, even glaucoma. So managing myopia isn't just about seeing clearly, it's also about protecting your eye health for the long haul.
Exactly. So in this deep dive, we're going to examine a study that investigates how orthoc can potentially help slow down that myopia progression. And it all comes down to a fascinating concept called peripheral defocus.
Which sounds a little trippy. I know.
Yeah, I'm already intrigued. It sounds like we're going to get to the cornea of this issue.
Hopefully it won't be a blurry mess.
Okay, so before we get too deep into this study, let's break down the basics for our listeners who might not be totally familiar with orthoc. Could you explain a bit more about how it actually works?
Sure. So as we mentioned earlier, orthoc involves wearing special contact lenses overnight. These lenses are designed to gently reshape the cornea, which is the clear front part of your eye. And this reshaping temporarily corrects your vision during the day.
So it's like a mini eye makeover while you sleep.
Exactly. But here's the really interesting part. It's not just about seeing better during the day. This reshaping also creates a very specific pattern of focus and blur on the retina, the light-sensitive tissue at the back of your eye.
Okay, so it's manipulating the way light hits the back of your eye. I'm starting to see how this ties into peripheral defocus.
You got it. You see, in a normal eye light from both the center and the edges of your field of vision should focus sharply on the retina. But in myopic eyes, the peripheral vision, meaning the stuff you see out of the corners of your eyes, tends to be blurry in a way that actually encourages the eyeball to elongate.
And that elongation is what makes myopia worse.
Right, exactly. It's a bit of a vicious cycle, and that's where ortho comes in. It aims to flip this process by inducing what's called myopic defocus in the periphery.
Hold on, inducing blur. That sounds counterintuitive.
It might sound strange, but it's all about strategically manipulating the way light focuses on the retina. By creating a specific type of blur in the peripheral vision, ortho can actually counteract the natural blur that's driving myopia progression.
So it's like fighting fire with fire, blur with blur.
That's one way to put it.
Okay, I'm officially hooked. Now, you mentioned a study that delves into all of this. What can you tell us about it?
Well, the study we're looking at is a meta-analysis, which basically means it combined data from several smaller studies to get a more comprehensive picture. It was published in the Journal of Clinical Medicine, and its title is Peripheral Defocus in Orthokeratology, Myopia Correction, Systematic Review, and Meta-Analysis.
Wow, that's a mouthful. So what were they actually investigating?
They wanted to see how effective orthoc is at inducing this peripheral defocus and whether that effect is consistent across different studies and different populations.
Okay, so they're trying to confirm whether this idea of using blur to fight blur actually holds up.
Exactly.
Sounds like a solid plan.
Yeah.
So how did they go about doing this meta-analysis? Like, what kind of data were they working with?
So they analyzed data from 9 different studies with a total of 259 participants.
Wow, 9 studies. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it gives them a really good sample size to work with. And all the participants in these studies had myopia, and they wore orthoc lenses for various amounts of time.
Okay, so a mix of people, different levels of myopia, different durations of treatment. That helps paint a broader picture.
Right. And the studies use specialized instruments to measure something called relative peripheral refraction. Basically, this tells you how blurry the edges of a person's vision are compared to the center. And they took these measurements both before and after the participants wore the orthoc lenses.
So they're looking at how orthoglamz changes that peripheral blur over time. Makes sense. And what did they find? Did the lenses actually make a difference?
The results were pretty compelling. They found that orthoc consistently induced myopic defocus in the peripheral retina. It shifted the blur in a way that's thought to help slow down myopia progression. And this effect was observed in both short-term and long-term studies, which suggests that it's not just a temporary fix.
That's really promising. So even after a short period of wearing ortho lenses, you start to see changes in that peripheral blur. That's encouraging for people who might be considering this treatment.
Definitely. And the average amount of myopic defocus they induced was minus 2.56 diopters, which is significant.
Okay, so that number, minus 2.56 diopters, that represents the degree of blur they created in the periphery.
Precisely. The higher the number, the more myopic defocus they induced.
Got it. So it seems like orthoc is doing what it's supposed to be doing, creating that targeted blur. But I'm curious about the details. You mentioned that they analyzed data from 9 different studies. Did anything interesting stand out from those individual studies?
Well, one thing that caught my eye was that the amount of myopic defocus induced by orthoc wasn't exactly the same across all the studies. There was some variation.
Oh, really? So some studies saw a more dramatic shift than others.
Exactly. And that's something that researchers are still trying to fully understand. What factors contribute to those differences? Could it be the type of orthoc lenses used, the length of time the participants wore them, or maybe something about the individual's eyes?
So many questions.
Yeah.
It seems like there's still a lot to learn about how to optimize this treatment.
Absolutely. But even with those questions, the fact that they consistently observed this myopic defocus across multiple studies is really encouraging. It adds weight to the idea that this is a key mechanism behind orthoc's effectiveness.
Yeah, it's like we're piecing together a puzzle and we're starting to see the bigger picture. But, of course, there are always going to be some missing pieces.
That's the nature of research. Always more to discover.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to move on to part 2 of our deep dive, where we'll explore some of the limitations of this study and discuss the broader context of myopia control.
Sounds good. I'm looking forward to delving further into this fascinating topic.
Me too. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back, everyone. So before the break, we were talking about orthoc and its ability to induce myopic defocus in the peripheral retina. But as with any study, there are always limitations.
Right. No study is perfect, and this one is no exception.
So what are some of the things we need to keep in mind when interpreting these findings?
Well, one limitation they highlighted is that this was a meta-analysis, meaning they were relying on data that was already published in those 9 individual studies.
Right.
They didn't have access to the raw data from those studies.
So they couldn't dig down into the nitty-gritty details of each participant.
Exactly. They were limited to the information that was reported in the published articles, which means they couldn't explore certain variables in as much depth as they might have liked.
Okay, so it's like trying to bake a cake using only the ingredients list. You might be able to get a decent cake, but you won't know the exact techniques the baker used or the subtle variations that make it truly special.
That's a great analogy. And another limitation is that those 9 studies weren't all designed exactly the same way. They varied in terms of the length of follow-up, the types of orthoc lenses used, the age range of the participants. All those factors could potentially influence the results.
Makes sense. So we have to be a bit cautious about generalizing these findings too broadly.
Exactly. It's important to acknowledge that there's still some variability out there, and more research is always needed to refine our understanding of how orthoc works and how to optimize its effectiveness.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Definitely not. And that brings us to a really important point. While this study focused specifically on orthoc, it's crucial to remember that it's not the only myopia control method out there.
Right. We've got a whole arsenal of tools in the fight against myopia.
Exactly. Besides orthoc, we've got things like low-dose atropine eye drops, multifocal contact lenses, spectacle lenses with peripheral lenslets. It's like a whole toolkit for managing nearsightedness.
Wow, that's a lot of options. So how do these other methods compare to orthoc? Do they also work by inducing peripheral defocus?
Some do, some don't. It's all about understanding the different mechanisms at play. So let's start with atropine.
Okay, atropine, those are eye drops, right?
Yep, low-dose atropine specifically. It's been used for years to treat various eye conditions, but in very low doses, it seems to help slow down myopia progression.
So it's like a secret weapon disguised as a common eye drop.
Kind of. The exact way it works is still a bit of a mystery, but scientists have a few theories.
Ooh, a mystery. I love it. Tell me more.
Well, one theory is that atropine might directly affect the growth signals in the eye, kind of putting the brakes on that eyeball elongation we talked about earlier.
Makes sense. Slowing down that excessive growth is key.
Right. Another theory is that it might help reduce strain on the eye muscles involved in focusing. So by relaxing those muscles, it could indirectly help slow down myopia progression.
Interesting. So atropine might be tackling the problem from multiple angles.
That's the idea. Now let's move on to multifocal contact lenses.
Okay, multifocal contacts. I've heard of those. Aren't those the ones with different zones for seeing at different distances?
You got it. Unlike regular contact lenses that just have one power for correcting your vision, these have multiple powers, kind of like progressive eyeglasses.
Okay, so different parts of the lens correct for near vision, far vision, and everything in between.
Exactly. And here's the interesting part. Some designs of multifocal contact lenses can also create that myopic defocus in the periphery that we've been talking about. It's like getting some of the benefits of orthoc, but with the added convenience of not having to wear lenses overnight.
So it's another way of manipulating that peripheral blur to slow down myopia.
Precisely. And lastly, we have spectacle lenses with peripheral lenslets.
Lenslets, those sound fancy. What are they?
They're basically tiny lenses embedded in the spectacle lens. Think of it like glasses with a secret weapon against myopia.
Okay, I'm trying to picture this. So instead of having a smooth transition between different powers like in progressive lenses, these have distinct little lenses all over.
Exactly. And guess what? They're designed to create, you guessed it, myopic defocus in the peripheral vision.
So it seems like no matter what method we're talking about, this idea of peripheral defocus keeps popping up as a key player in myopia control.
It really does. It's becoming more and more clear that manipulating that peripheral blur is a crucial part of the equation.
Okay, so we've got orthocatropine, multifocal contacts, spectacle lenses with lenslets. It's like a whole buffet of myopia control options. But with so many choices, how do you even begin to decide which one is right for you?
That's where a good eye doctor comes in. They can help you weigh the pros and cons of each method based on your individual needs and preferences.
Right. It's like choosing a car.
Yeah.
You've got to consider your budget, your lifestyle, what features are most important to you.
Exactly. Some people might prefer the convenience of eye drops, while others might prioritize clear vision during the day, which Orthoc provides. It's all about finding the best fit.
So it's a personalized decision. No one-size-fits-all solution.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to have those conversations with an eye care professional. They can assess your specific situation and guide you toward the most appropriate treatment.
It's like having a personal trainer for your eyes.
I like that. A vision coach.
So before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier. The idea that there's still a lot we don't know about myopia control. What are some of the big unanswered questions that researchers are still grappling with?
Well, one of the big ones is the long-term effectiveness of these treatments. We have good evidence that they can slow down myopia progression in the short term, but what happens over the course of years or even decades? That's something we need more data on.
Yeah, it'd be great to know how these treatments impact eye health over the long haul.
Absolutely. And another question is how to personalize treatment even further. We talked about how orthoc can induce different amounts of myopic defocus, but what's the optimal amount for each individual? Could we tailor the lens design or the treatment duration to achieve even better results?
So it's about fine-tuning the approach to maximize the benefits for each person.
Exactly, and that's where things get really exciting. The potential for personalized myopia management is huge.
It's like the future of eye care is becoming more and more tailored to the individual.
Precisely. And that's a trend I'm definitely excited to see unfold.
Me too. Well, this has been a truly fascinating deep dive into the world of myopia control. We've covered a lot of ground from the science behind orthoc to the various treatment options available.
And it's clear that this field is constantly evolving. New research is emerging, new technologies are being developed. It's a really exciting time to be following these advancements.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
And we'll definitely be keeping our eyes peeled for the latest developments. Pun intended.
Of course. Always gotta sneak in a good pun.
But in all seriousness, this has been an incredibly informative discussion. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
The pleasure was all mine. Always happy to nerd out about myopia control.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of myopia control. We hope you found it insightful and engaging. And if you're interested in learning more, we encourage you to check out the show notes for links to the study we discussed and other helpful resources.
And of course, if you have any concerns about your own vision or your child's vision, don't hesitate to consult an eye care professional.
Absolutely. They can provide personalized guidance and help you navigate all the options available. Until next time, keep those minds sharp and those eyes healthy.
Okay, so we've been talking about this idea of myopic defocus and how it's a key part of orthokeratology and other myopia control methods, but I'm curious, what's next for this whole field? What are researchers focused on now?
One area that's really exciting is the potential for personalized myopia management.
Personalized, like custom-made solutions for each person's eyes.
That's the idea. Imagine if we could figure out the precise amount of peripheral defocus needed to achieve the best possible outcome for each individual. It's like bespoke tailoring for your eyeballs.
I love that analogy, bespoke tailoring for your eyeballs. It sounds futuristic, but in a good way.
It's still early days, but the study we discussed hints at this possibility. Remember how we talked about the variation in myopic defocus across the different studies?
Okay.
Well, some researchers believe that by fine-tuning the amount of defocus induced by orthotic lenses or other methods, we could potentially get even better results. That's incredible. So instead of a one-size-fits-all approach, we could be moving towards treatments that are specifically designed for each person's unique needs.
Exactly. It's about optimizing treatment based on individual factors, like the shape of the eye, the severity of myopia, and even lifestyle considerations.
So it's like taking all the knowledge we've gained about myopia and using it to create a more targeted and effective approach.
You got it. It's about moving from simply correcting vision to truly managing myopia and shaping its course.
This has been an eye-opening deep dive, no pun intended. We've gone from blurry vision to the intricacies of peripheral defocus and the potential for personalized treatments. It feels like we've only scratched the surface.
There's definitely a lot more to discover, but that's the beauty of science, isn't it? It's a constant journey of exploration and understanding.
I couldn't agree more. Well, I want to thank you for guiding us through this complex topic with such clarity and enthusiasm.
The pleasure was all mine. I always enjoy diving into these fascinating subjects with you.
And a huge thank you to all of you for joining us on this journey into the world of myopia control. If you're keen to learn more, check out the show notes for links to the study we discussed and other helpful resources. And remember, if you have any concerns about your own vision or your child's vision, don't hesitate to consult an eye care professional.
Absolutely. They can provide personalized advice and help you navigate the many options available.
Until next time, keep those minds sharp and those eyes healthy. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.